Hi, this is the second instructional video for the explain section of the safety unit, and this will cover safety symbols. So if you take a look, I will load this up. This link will go right there. So my expectation is you watch the video through one time, get the whole idea of everything, and then you go back a second time, and I want you to find this handout. And once you watch the video the second time through, you're going to go through and answer these, fill this chart out. Okay. Then you're going to take the chart and you're going to take this handout to the teacher, and she's going to look over your notes and initial. Okay. All right. So let's talk about safety symbols. We will see some of the safety symbols this year. We won't see a lot, but I think it's important to begin exposing you to these symbols so you're familiar with them when you get into high school. Each year you increase your grade level. The difficulty of science increases and the complexity of it increases. You're going to see this year a lot of the topics I cover, you've already covered to some degree. We are going to add some rigor to it and add some complexity to those simple ideas you learned back in fourth, fifth, and to some degree sixth grade. Okay, so that's what I'm doing with a safety symbol. We're going to hit some of these. We're going to see some of these this year, not a lot of them, but it is our beginning of safety symbols. So when you start seeing more of them in high school and maybe in eighth grade, you'll be more familiar with them. All right, so let's talk. You're going to learn about some of the key safety symbols. There isn't one definitive symbol, design, and color and shape that is universal for everything. They do have some differences in different labs in different countries. So I'm trying to pick some of the common ones. So eye protection. It is usually a picture of goggles, basically. And this means that this lab, if you see this on a lab sheet, that means that, hey, you need to wear these because what you're going to be working with in the lab could damage your eyes. If you see this picture on a bottle of chemicals, whether it's a liquid chemical or a dry chemical, that means, hey, when you're working with this chemical, you need to wear eye protection. And I'm going to tell you right now, technically, eyeglasses are not enough protection because something could come into the sides, the bottoms, or the tops. So you really should have those protective eyewear goggles, or they do have safety glasses that have plastic around the sides. Okay. All right, next one. This is an apron. You might see a lab coat. This means that you need to protect your clothing because whatever you're going to do or work with in the lab could potentially harm your clothing. So it could be a chemical, it could be a stain, it could be fire or heat. Again, if this symbol is on a bottle of something or a canister of something, it means the same thing. Hey, be protective of your clothing. All right. While we're talking about clothing, we do have a safety rule that says, if your hair is hanging down, if you have hanging jewelry, if you have long sleeves, make sure you don't do that during the lab, have those things. So like if you have your hair long and we're working with Bunsen burners, which we aren't really going to use Bunsen burners this year, hair will catch on fire. So we need you to pull it back. If we have long jewelry, it could get caught on a beaker or, it could get in a flame. So we want to make sure we take those off. So, if I have long jewelry on, I will take it off and put it on my desk. I tend to roll up my sleeves so that it doesn't get caught on anything. Another general rule is not to wear sandals during the lab because we don't want to spill stuff on our toes. So if those things will come into play, I will let you know ahead of time so that we can make sure we are prepared for that day. Okay, I will always let you know ahead of time if there's something that needs to change or happen. All right, hand protection. Simple. It's a gloved hand. Okay. Um, so if we need hand protection, I will make sure that I have enough gloves for all of us. Hopefully they'll fit. Um, if you are allergic to latex, that would be good to let me know so I make sure that I don't have latex gloves. Um, Hand protection. Pretty simple, just like goggle protection. Okay. This symbol here of a skull and crossbones. Oh, look, it'll move. I wanted to show you two different. It could be just the skull and crossbones. It could be an all bottle. This just means it's a toxic chemical. I mean, these are the things that under no circumstance do you put in your mouth or ingest in any way. Okay. Um, I'm just going to leave it there. There are always seventh graders who I give this rule: don't put anything in your mouth, don't taste anything. And they always, oh, she's not looking, I'm just going to lick my finger and taste it. Please don't do that. Okay. You signed a safety contract that said you wouldn't. I'm trusting that you wouldn't. When you do that, it could be a toxic chemical. Best case scenario, you go to the hospital because you're sick to your stomach. Worst case scenario, you have to go to the hospital and have your stomach pumped. I mean, some of these toxic chemicals, not in my lab because we are only middle school, but if we're talking college level, some of them can kill you. Okay. So we are, as scientists, you never taste anything that's in the science lab, period. Okay. Assume that it's toxic, even though you don't know. Okay. All right. Flammable, pretty easy. It's a flame. Okay. That means that whatever you're working with can catch on fire. Okay. It doesn't mean we're going to use a fire necessarily. We are not going to use a Bunsen burner in class. When we need heat, we will use an element that kind of heats up, kind of like the top of your stove. And that can get very hot and it can catch things on fire, but we generally don't use an open flame. You won't do that until high school. Okay. So flammable means it can catch on fire. Glassware safety. Almost all of the containers we use will be glass. There's only a couple things that are plastic, and so if you drop them on the ground, they're going to shatter and break. If you bang them on the table too hard, they will crack. So glassware safety, be careful with them. If your hands are wet, they are slippery. So I would make sure I carry everything with two hands. Anytime I give you glassware to use, I will always inspect it before I put it on your tray to make sure there aren't any cracks or chips or bubbles in the glass. If those appear, they are just easier to break. If you inspect the materials and you notice a crack or a chip or a bubble, you're just going to raise your hand, let me know, and I'll swap out the materials. Okay? You have an accident. They happen and something breaks. You're going to call me over. I'm going to ask what happened. I'm going to check and make sure nobody cut themselves. They don't have, none of the chemicals are on them. And I'll probably move your team to another area and I'll clean up the materials. I don't want you cleaning up the chemicals. I don't want you picking up pieces of glass because I don't want you to cut yourself. Okay. If it happens because of horseplay, the same thing's going to happen. I'm going to check you, make sure there's no chemicals or any, glass anywhere. I'll probably move your team. I'll clean up, and then we'll talk later about consequences for the horseplay. Okay. Glassware. Sharp objects. This is a very fuzzy picture of a scalpel. It could be scissors. Sharp objects, you're going to make sure that you cut away from yourself. This is not a time to see how sharp it is with your finger. This isn't a time to test things and to be stinkers. Okay. If you cut yourself, let me know. I need to know that just the littlest things. If we were doing dissections, they have those little pins that you put in things. They're like safety pins. They're kind of like straight pins. If you poked yourself, I would want to know, just to make sure that if you have some kind of allergic reaction, the nurse knows that, hey, it could have been because we were working with this chemical and they might be allergic to it. So any little thing, you need to make sure you cut yourself, you poke yourself, any of those things. Something spilled on you, we're still going to go through and wash everything with soap and water, but I just need to make sure the nurse knows, just in case you have some kind of reaction later down the road. Okay? Electrical safety. The logical symbol is the plug. The not so logical symbol is that arrow. I will tend to use the plug. And we know that electrical items don't mix with water. Water is a conductor. So some of you have heard, if you are somebody who boats and swims in lakes, the general rule is when a storm comes, you get off the lake. That's because water conducts electricity very easily. Okay, so when we're working with electricity, there will be times where I might tape off sinks. If you look around the classroom, the outlets are not very strategically put in place. They didn't ask me when they designed it. I would not have put electrical outlets so close to sinks. So there will be times where I will tape off sinks and say, don't use this sink because we're going to use electricity near that sink. There might be times where I only let you use some of the sinks and not all of the sinks. So electrical safety, we've got to be careful with that. Corrosive substance. Corrosive, if you look at the picture, the best way to explain it is a corrosive substance is something that can eat away, can react chemically with something. So, maybe we're testing corrosiveness of different liquids on metal. So we would pour, a liquid on a nail and we would watch to see what happens. If it is corrosive, it might bubble, it might have a smell to it, a fume to it. There are things that are corrosive to fabrics. There are things that are corrosive to your skin. So this is a cautionary sign to let you know, hey, if you get this on your skin, you're going to want to wash it off immediately with soap and water because it might irritate your skin, might cause some redness. We are not going to work with really high corrosive materials. There are some that would cause great harm to your skin. We won't use those in 7th grade. But we all have different allergies to things. So something that is irritant to one person might not be for the other. So again, if you get some kind of chemical on you, you're just going to let me know so I can make a mental note or a written note and let the nurse know in case you have some kind of allergic reaction to it. Okay? All right. Let's take a look at biohazard. Biohazard. You're going to see this a lot in doctor's offices. This is used when anything biological is used, and we generally have to dispose of biologics in a different way. We can't just throw them in the trash. So when you go to your doctor's office, you might see this whenever there's injections, whenever there is, especially with COVID, all the masks and the gowns that doctors would wear, those have to be disposed of in a different way because of the contaminants that are on that. So anything having to do with with blood, with mucus, anything that would carry those germs or pathogens, we would dispose of in a different way. I don't think we're probably not going to use too much of this at all. But I wanted to make sure you saw this, especially since we've had COVID the past couple of years. I'm going to assume that you've seen this in some of the doctor's offices. Okay, it should be there. Radioactive. This is a common symbol, although we don't have anything radioactive in classroom. But it looks like or is similar to, because it's round, the biohazard. Radioactive we won't use, but they do use it in science in colleges. So radioactive. All right, so in this lesson, you learned some of the key safety symbols. I'm going to tell you there's going to be a test over these, and I'm not going to tell you which symbols are going to be included in the test. So yeah, you got to know them all. Okay. What the next step is, you need to take your notes to your teacher and the handout, the safety handout, and she will sign off on it or he will sign off on it. You're not going to throw them away. You're going to put them in your folder because you are going to need them to study for your test. And there is a third video. The third video will be about science equipment. Okay. All right. So that is science safety symbol.